Hey everyone, welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar, and in this video we're going to be talking about the readiness of the U.S. military to confront a global power like China or Russia, but particularly we're going to be looking at China. Recent war games by the U.S. Congress, by the Pentagon, by just strategic entities in Washington, D.C. That have been playing out what a major conflict, especially around the island of Taiwan, would look like in the South China Sea. And they keep coming to a similar conclusion. Either the United States would lose, or the United States would lose forces so heavily that the victory is bittersweet. And the Wall Street Journal just came out with an article saying the U.S. is not yet ready for a major power conflict. I'm going to be walking you through some of the numbers, some of the publicly available stuff. I got an email this week from a recruiter who was pointing me to the fact that the U.S. Army, and he said that this is very similar to what's actually happening in other branches too, that recruiters that have specialties in combat arms are being recalled from their recruiting offices back to their combat units, which really kind of points to the fact that the U.S. military is struggling in order to keep its combat divisions, combat military units ready for action. That's concerning. The U.S. Army has had a major recruiting shortfall in the past several years. Last year in 2022, they fell short by about 20,000 soldiers. That's not good. And 2023, as we come to a close here, because fiscal year ends in September, looks like they're going to be running about 20,000 short again this year. So the U.S. Army is supposed to be at 486,000 members strong. By September, they're estimating that the U.S. Army will be down to 445,000. That's about 8% under force. So almost 1 out of every 10 positions inside the military that's supposed to have a soldier doing something will be empty. Is that going to have a problem? Is that going to cause problems? If you go into a war where you've effectively lost 10% of your soldiers before the first shot is fired, is that a good thing? No. So not only is the U.S. military undermanned, but when you look at the maintenance issues that are out there, the simple fact is the U.S. Navy, a lot of the ships that are out there on the ocean have been delaying maintenance issues. They're not tip-top shape, partially due to budgeting reasons, but also partially because they keep getting pressured by the White House to get those ships out on the sea where they can project power. By delaying these maintenance issues, it means that in a global conflict, we're going to have more and more issues out there of systems not operating properly, platforms not operating properly. And most importantly, the U.S. military is structurally built around strategies that are designed for conflicts that were fought 10, 20, 40, 70 years ago. When we have a military that's designed around a Cold War type conflict, or even a World War II type conflict, and then we're looking at engaging in warfare with China that is designing their military around the next war. China already is in testing stages for their hypersonic missiles. Russia has already fielded those on aircraft as well as ships. That is serious. The United States does not have hypersonic missiles, and the United States has no capabilities of defending against hypersonic missiles. China has been heavily investing in missiles, while the United States has been heavily investing in targets for those missiles. The United States has poured ridiculous amounts of money into building these super highly effective combat ships, or super expensive at the very least. The United States has grown corrupt in its procurement processes so that weapon systems like the F-35, extremely over budget, and then when you look at the performance, it is underwhelming. Other nations have built similar capabilities for far less cost. And it's not just the cost of producing them that's the issue, but cost of maintenance. The United States Air Force and the United States Navy, as well as the Marine Corps, are having issues fielding their combat aircraft because they can't afford maintenance. And that's not because they don't have budget for it. That's not because we don't spend ridiculous amounts of money on maintenance. The issue is that we're creating weapon systems that are so stinking expensive that we can't afford to keep operating them. In a major conflict with China or other countries, we're going to lose a lot of specialized equipment. When you're fighting a bunch of people that are living in caves in Afghanistan, you can get away with all sorts of stuff. You can get away with medevacs. You can get away with taking B-52s and flying them through protected airspace. Friends, we are not going to get B-52s anywhere close to the Chinese mainland. They will get shot down so fast it's not even funny. And yet we spend a ton of money maintaining these bombers that really won't have much use in a major conflict with China. United States aircraft carriers are great for projecting power over people with turbines in Yemen, but they really, really stink in a major power conflict. China has invested heavily in anti-ship ballistic missiles that are designed to take out our carriers. Pretty much all times that they run the war game scenarios, we lose carriers. With 10,000 U.S. military servicemen on each carrier, that's a serious blow. Not only that, but when we lose that carrier, we lose the ability for the United States to project power at the conflict in Taiwan. The United States military has recognized that and said, you know what, we need more submarines. But here's the thing. When it takes 20 or 30 years to build a submarine, yeah, we got a problem. We got a problem. We desperately need submarines, but we can't produce them. China out there is over there is cranking out cheap diesel-powered submarines that are highly efficient and can become very quiet when they're running on battery power. Gee, who makes all the batteries in the world? That's right, China does. Friends, China has been building its arsenal, building its military around principles of how they're going to win the next conflict. The United States is still trying to figure out how to evacuate civilians out of Sudan, still trying to fight the global war on terror in Afghanistan. The United States has troops deployed in over 50 countries around the world. We're trying to be the world's policeman, and when we look at the military budget of how much ridiculous amounts of money we're spending, but how much of that money is actually going into targeted programs that will help us win the next war. Most people agree that we're not in a good place. When we look at who's willing to serve in the U.S. military, we see that within the age brackets of recruitment, only 23% of Americans who are in those age brackets would be eligible to serve. Only 23%. If we did a full draft, we drafted every single eligible, we could only draft about 23%. Only 9% of young people today are even willing to consider service in the U.S. military. More troubling still, since most people who volunteer for military service come from families that have military members in them, only 75% of current military members would recommend to a loved one. That's what it was in 2019. It was 75% would recommend to a loved one or someone they know to serve in the military. It's down to 63%, a 12% drop in just 2 years. The fact that people in the military don't think you should be joining the military anymore should be concerning. with the U.S. military, the U.S. Army about 40,000 people short. That's the equivalent of 4 smaller infantry divisions. And considering the fact that we only have 10 current infantry divisions, now we have other divisions, we have armored divisions, we have all sorts of support units and everything like that. But the fact that our U.S. military is already about 10% down in its capabilities should be concerning. And that email from one of the viewers about the fact that the U.S. Army is stripping recruiters who have combat arms, MOSs or specialties, and redeploying them back with combat units and getting them out of the recruiting offices should be concerning. I mean, with such a big recruiting shortfall, you think that we would want to make sure that we have as many people in recruiting as possible. But the simple fact is that in the background, the U.S. Army is looking about the fact that they cannot field these combat units understaffed the way they are. When they're undermanned like this, it seriously degrades their combat effectiveness. If they're called on by the President of the United States to deploy immediately, they would have to say, this unit is not ready to deploy. And that's something that they really shouldn't be able to say. The main goal of the U.S. military is to be ready to deploy combat effective forces quickly to wherever they're needed around the world. While we have a military that is completely not being deployed to the southern border, even though the United States is being invaded, I talk about in another video how 4,300 Chinese immigrants came across the southern border illegally in just a 3-month period this winter. And those are just the ones that were caught. Not to mention the 5.4 million Chinese citizens, mind you, Chinese citizens that reside inside the United States. Some of them illegally overstaying their visas, some on legal visas. All that to say, if we get into a major conflict with China, the fact that there are 5 times the United States military's numbers of Chinese citizens inside the United States is a matter for concern. Now, I'm not saying that they're all Chinese military or whatever, but be aware that in order to get a visa to go to the United States, I've heard enough reports that you have to be a card-carrying member of the Chinese Communist Party. And to get a lot of positions to go study abroad, you have to have served in the Chinese military. Friends, we are at a serious disadvantage here. If you think that the country that pumps out all the cheap plastic crap for the world won't be able to pump out cheap Chinese crap drones and munitions, they have all the factories. In a great power conflict between the United States and China, we're going to be really in a bad place. And that's the short of it. What can be done to fix all this? I don't know. But when we see rising powers go up against powers that are in decline, usually we end up with a world war or a major conflict. And the rising power usually wins. And when they do, they dismantle the empire of the old empire. And that's where we're kind of standing right now. Is if we get into a major conflict with China, not only will they probably humiliate us and defeat us, they will probably strip us of much of the influence we have around the world. Ours is a financial empire. Ours is a diplomatic empire, an empire of alliances. Alliances where we prop up other countries and they do hardly anything for us. So what do? Well, I don't know there is anything we can do at this point. But individually we can do a lot. You can get more prepared because hard times are probably coming for the United States. Whether conflict, whether Great Depression, financial warfare, all these things. Get more prepared. All right, folks, if you want to check out the news, the current news, you can go over to thepoplarreport.com. This article, some of the articles related to this are up there on the website. You can check that out for yourself, and you can check that out all times during the day. The kind of news stories that we cover on this channel keep getting propagated and getting linked up on that website, so you can consider that a supplement to this channel. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to check out another video, there's one right over here. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report out.